The test of love. Love suffereth long, and is kind. Beareth all things, believeth all things, hopeth all things, endureth all things. Can we truthfully say, I am persuaded, that neither death, nor life, nor angels, nor principalities, nor powers, nor things present, nor things to come, nor height, nor depth, nor any other creature, shall be able to separate us from the love of God, which is in Christ Jesus our Lord? The Master said, This is my commandment, that ye love one another, as I have loved you. Greater love hath no man than this, that a man lay down his life for his friends. Love your enemies. That ye may be the children of your Father which is in heaven. For he maketh his sun to rise on the evil and on the good, and sendeth rain on the just and on the unjust. They that do not love their worst enemy have not even begun to develop. The Father's love is the golden thread that is woven throughout the scriptures, which enlarges and spreads until the whole law is fulfilled in God so loved the world, that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish, but have everlasting life. To fulfill the law of love is more than simply to love those who love us, for by so doing we have not reached the faintest conception of divine love. Love is giving out the best that is within us. Then, where slights, slurs, or even suspicions have been allowed to affect us, love cannot mean all that it should in our experience. The Master asks of us that we love him, that we keep his commandments, that he may abide with us, even as he abides with the Father. All of us believe, all know, and all understand that those things that hinder are caused by selfishness. This prevents even the dawn of the concept of what love should mean to us. Few of us have found the love that makes us free indeed, that keeps us from making unkind remarks, and prevents us from being disappointed in things, in people, and in conditions. How much are we willing to bear, to do, and to suffer that others may become aware of the love of the Father? The entity needs, then, gain the better control of self through the will's forces, knowing first that the desires of the heart, when made in keeping with the giver of all good and perfect gifts, give peace, quiet and contentment, which brings happiness. Finding self then in that way, for, as has been given, seek ye first the ways of the Lord. Then, all these things shall be added unto you. In the service then, as has been given, will this be found to be the greater work, the greater ability, of the entity? Then keep that first and foremost, and the joy, the blessings, the peace, that passeth all understanding, will be in that way, that manner, that gives joy in earth, satisfaction in life, the home in the hereafter. For in him is light, and the light shineth and giveth peace and harmony in the life in the earth's plane. And to be in any position contrariwise with those laws brings distrust, selfishness, unsatisfactory relations, unsatisfactory conditions. For love is the key of earth and heaven. For though there be many lands, many joys, many blessings, without love these are as nothing, for love suffereth long, is kind. Believeth all things, endureth all things. Vaunteth not itself, is not puffed up, and endureth through the entire life in earth, and maketh the soul one with him. Yet with the disappointments that have come in the active forces of the experience of the entity in the present, there has been the growth in the greater understanding, and more the abilities for the application in the truer sense of love casteth out fear. Love vaunteth not itself, is not puffed up, thinketh no evil. This is the greater of the stumbling steps in the experience of the entity in the present, to think no evil, to know that the love of the Father, of those forces that he may manifest in the earth through the sons of men, may be those very experiences in the activity of all that may bring strength. Then, that to be blotted from the experience is selfishness. becoming less and less self-aware, but more and more growing in the grace, the knowledge, the understanding that he doeth all things well. Considering that I still love my husband and want to win him back, please advise me just what is best. Then act that way. Not in any manner condoning those unhappy happenings, but forgetting self. How hath he put it? Love knoweth no evil. Love thinketh no evil. Love beareth all things, endureth all things. Without question. Then if that is thy purpose, take it to Jesus. And he will direct thee, he will guide thee. If thy mate then chooses to flaunt it all and to abuse, mistrust and leave all those things, bear it without question. Trusting in God and the promises in Jesus, and ye will find peace and harmony and glorious happiness in service to others. Keep that awareness of his presence. For, as he hath given, lo, I am with you always, even unto the end of the world. And though there may be abroad hate, avarice, selfishness, and those things that make men afraid, be still within thine own heart, thine own consciousness, and know that he is with thee. Then, as ye give so do ye receive. As he hath given, the love of the Father to the children of men is manifested in that spirit of Christmas. Christ Mass. That which may now be raised to that consciousness, that level above man's way of thought, man's concept of force, power or might. And that the real strength, the real hope, the real contribution is in that still small voice within. It is not in the tempest, not in the roar or the lore of the might of battle. Though there may be the destruction of life, of property, as is known materially. No one can destroy the soul but self. No one but self. Is there any other advice which would aid this body to perfect health, and is there any other treatment doctor could give this body which he isn't doing? We would keep that which has been outlined. Keep the ash in the system when the lights are given. The only change in the treatments that are administered externally would be more movement of the hand on the vertebra, see? More of an attitude and aptitude toward that being accomplished. If this body in treating is not able to see or feel that being accomplished, then there's little hope in carrying forward. As also in the body being treated. Keep the mind and body more and more in accord with that the Father is holding that which is necessary for the better and more complete development, for the better abilities of the body to manifest him in its material plane. Knowing there is nothing that may separate self from that love, that health, that strength, that understanding, but self. Be patient, be persistent, be in the attitude of receiving that as he sees fit. In the extremity he is thine aid. Explain how I may reach that point in my development where I may consciously control my incarnations and remember previous existences. As he has given, in me ye may become aware of all those things that ye have done to me, with me, from the beginning. Then, as we apply that, as he, the Master, is life. As he is the Maker, the Giver of life, the Creator of all that is of constructive nature that finds itself manifesting in the earth. We do his biddings. Love thy neighbor as thyself. Thy Lord, thy God, with all thine heart, mind, soul, body. And so do we become aware, in whatsoever way or manner he may give or will. As the Lord and the Giver. As being the way. For, indeed do we find him the way, when it is realized that the earth and the fullness thereof is the Lord's and his creation. Creating, then, with him. In the lives and hearts and souls of others his awareness brings to the consciousness of self what and where and when thou hast done this or that in an experience in the earth. For, as there is the practice in using any art that may be called a manifestation in the earth, there is brought, as with the music and the playing thereof, the sensing that prompts same to find expression in that activity. The same is true in color, in the application of the brush that portrays some activity or experience in the affairs in the life of a soul. Such is called soul music, soul painting. Such may be the experience of each soul as it applies and looks for and listens to the still small voice from within. 4. As he has given, I am from the beginning. I am Alpha and Omega. What hast thou done about me in thine experiences? And as we use that as we may write upon the pages of time and space, that we know respecting his love, his law, his patience with man, we become aware within ourselves that he walks and talks with men. Unless we alone shut him from our lives. 4. I am persuaded that heaven nor earth, principalities nor powers, may separate one from the love of him. And the more so when it may be felt, and is felt within self, that face, that body, bore in itself in the earth the ministration of thy hands. As to the abilities of the entity in the present, then, and that to which it may attain, and how, this is limited only to self. For be persuaded, there is nothing in heaven or hell that may prevent thee from knowing thy relationship to thy Creator, but thyself. Laying aside then the things that may easily beset, press on to the mark of the higher callings that are set in thy abilities to use thy activities in any of the decorative forces. For the beauty of man's mind is oft directed by the beauty of his environs. In considering the conditions that exist in the world, it is well that those present consider themselves and the means or manners in which they may induce others to consider the object of Christmas. The purpose for which the Christ came into the earth. First, that the level of man's consciousness might be such that he, man, would be as aware of God as of himself. Second, as in each of his promises to man, that love might abound. That there would be a continued communion with God through the Son, who offered himself as a means of man's approach to the Father. Are there others who should be asked to become board members at this time? Others might. But let these remain until there is more being accomplished by those already chosen. 4. Remember the law. It is the little leaven that leaveneth the whole lump. Again would it be repeated? It is here a little, there a little, line upon line, precept upon precept. Not that man does not know, has not heard of those activities necessary in each individual life to bring the joyous day of the Lord, but he needs to be reminded again and again. 4. All are children and are seeking their way. Oh, oft groping blindly, following those that would lead here or there, when there needs to be the reminding that we must love one another. Even as God has loved man and has made manifest that love. And day by day he manifests that love, if those that seek will but open their hearts, their eyes, their minds to the wondrous love which God, the Father, has bestowed upon the children of men. Hence we find when there were those periods of disputes, when there were the activities upon the Nile and in portions of the land now called Northern Africa, these brought physically evil days to the entity. In the name then calamus. But mentally brought developments as for the soul and its development for purposes. For even as he taught, he that is willing to lay down his life for a cause gains the cause. Then as he gave himself as a ransom for many, so may those who have embraced him gain a concept of that for which he stands and become active in that direction. Not for fame, not for fortune, not even for what may be termed a patriotic spirit. For or because of a wrong concept, but for those activities that are to bring the fruits of the Spirit. As hope, faith, love, long-suffering, brotherly kindness, gentleness, and most of all patience. For in patience we become aware of that relationship with the creative forces that may only be expressed in materiality in what we do to our fellow man. For, as ye do it unto the least of thy brethren, ye do it unto me, saith he that is the way, the truth, the light. Then often thy spiritual meditation enter into the Holy of Holies with him, for there he hath promised to meet thee. For if ye will open the door, I will enter and sup with thee. This is thy promise, this is thine. That ye may be glorified in me, saith he, as I may be glorified in the Father. And thus is the love of the Father for his children fulfilled in thy activity. These do not become then theory. They do not become speculative. But as ye do them, so is it measured to thee again. For greater love hath no man than that he lay down his own self for those that he loves. And that alone that ye have given. Of thy body, thy mind, thy strength. Do ye possess. Just as he, as thy guide, thy guard, thy hope, has given himself. So are ye his. So as ye expend your body, your mind, your purposes, your desires, to bring to others the consciousness of his abiding presence, so may ye know his peace, so it may be thine as ye accept, as ye use, as ye apply same in thy relationships to thy fellow man day by day. For as he hath given, God hath not willed that any soul should perish, but hath with every temptation prepared a way, a manner through which the knowledge of his love, of his promises, may come to the consciousness of his children. Do this and it will be a whole life. Live a thing, not profess it. Live and act that way and manner as ye would have others live and act toward you. And in this you will see the good even in those that would despitefully use you, that would take advantage. Remember, vengeance is the Father's, not thine. Did to any he ever give wealth or fame or fortune? Only in the fortunes of suffering, the fortunes of service, the fortunes of turning the other cheek. When thou art smitten by those that would despitefully use thee, that would use thee even for their own selfish purposes. For the Lord is not slack with his judgments, and those that hold to that as is an ideal. Not in men, not in things, not in places, not in positions, but that which may be given even as he hath given. Ye have heard it said, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, but I say unto you, do good unto those that despitefully use you. For in so doing ye will heap coals of fire upon the heads of those that would misuse you. In the experience in the present from same a German incarnation during the Crusades, we find those at times of conflicting influences. For though the cross leads, those that fall in the shadow of same, those that use same as a pretense, become even as self in that experience. An outcast. But know as even then, the Lord is the Lord of the just and the unjust, and hath not willed that any soul should perish, but has with every temptation prepared a means, a way of escape. And calls on thee, his Son, in thy dealings with thy fellow man, to make manifest in those relationships those ideals with thy fellow man, even as thou didst when ye led many to the altar, to the confession, to those experiences in that land. Hence there have been those periods of contemplations of the return to the preparation of self for such an activity. Laudable indeed be these, my son, but know the Lord loveth those that show mercy and peace and justice, even to those that would despitefully use you. The entity then during the American Revolution was among those of the soldiery. Not as a man but among those who aided in the activities in the environs about what is now Camden, Jersey. And those activities made for suffering of bodily experiences, both for the hired aid and those that held to the cause. The entity in its ministry to those of its own peoples as well as to those whom its peoples and self served, gained much in that of liberty. Not of body but of mind, and the abilities to give aid, even in the physical, to those that were opposed in expression to the very self or associates. Hence tolerance and love was born in the innate influence, that in the experiences in the present, while under periods of strife or of misunderstanding, has grown to be that where love hath overcome. For it thinketh no evil, it vaunteth not itself and is not easily puffed up. These have been those influences gained by the entity from those experiences in that individual sojourn then, in the name of Louisa Hinellen. Knowledge, as has been given of old, that has caused man's uprising and downsitting, is from misapplication of law. Know that thy God is law. That law is love. Know ye then the law and apply it, but comply in thy own life, in thy own application, by doing that yourselves that ye would have thy neighbor do. This makes for that which is in keeping with a fact that has been from the foundations of the earth. God is. And they that would know him must believe that he is and may be made manifest in their dealings with their fellow man. Then until ye yourselves, as individuals, may see that ye would worship in thy Creator, in those that would speak evil of thee, those that hate and despitefully use thee, ye have not begun to think. Give all guidance that will be helpful to entities' spiritual development. Look to meet the Father, the God within self. For he has promised to meet each soul there. Know that the Father in each soul makes for that unison of purpose in man's activity, as that God would glorify man in the material earth. Being a manifestation of God. Man's purpose, then, should be the glorifying of the Father God in the relationships as toward another. These we see demonstrated in that he gave his only begotten Son that we through him might have life, and have it more abundantly. Study, then, to show thyself approved unto thy Maker, rightly divining the words of truth, keeping self unspotted from the world. Coming under the benevolent influences of Jupiter with those of Venus, we will find that love's influence will rule the life throughout, will if the understanding of love in its broader sense be set as the criterion in the life of the entity, and will cast out fear. That is so easily builded in the experience of human endeavor that looks on the material world as I must conquer. I must make a portion of self and same. Remembering that as was given, God so loved the world as to give his only begotten Son, who took on the form of flesh that he might know the manner of man's experience in the earth. Being, then, as a brother. And he, or she, that asketh in that name, seeketh even as the brother to gain that ability to serve the better, even as he thought it not robbery to call himself the Son of God, yet it was abusing those forces in his life to turn them wholly to secular interests. There has long been sought, by a few, the interpretation of the seven centers. And many have in various stages of awareness or development placed the association or connection between physical, mental and spiritual in varied portions of the body. Some have interpreted as of the mind, motivated by impulse. And thus called the center from which mind acts. This is only relatively so, as will be understood by those who analyze those conditions presented through these interpretations. For in fact the body, the mind and the soul are one, in the material manifestation. Yet in analyzing them, as given through the revelation by John, they are active in the various influences that are a part of each living organism conceived in the forces making up that known as man. That power able to conceive in mind of God and to demonstrate same in relationships to others. That in mind able to conceive of manners for the destruction of its fellow man, little realizing that it is self being destroyed by that very activity. Then, why are there such contradictions within those very influences? As is said, in the heart love finds its way. Love is conceived as of God, as of all pleasant, as all giving. Given in that great expression. Indicating to what power it may arise. God so loved the world as to give his only begotten Son. That through him we might have eternal life. Yet the other side, or the reverse of love, is suffering, hate, malice, injustice. It is the reverse. Why? What is that about man's activity and body, as an individual, that causes such? This has been indicated through those patterns which have been used as illustrations of what took place in the union of bodies, that through desire, hope, conceived or prepared in conception, a channel through which all this contradiction might be made manifest. Is the first cause, then, that the separation of God and the desire for companionship with himself, that is created or brought into a material manifestation the reverse of love, of hope, of patience, of all the attributes that are the spirit of activity, the moving influence or force. This we see manifested in a physical body through the glandular system. As the activity of conception, the dividing of the activity of the gland itself, that brings conception. Thus, this is the first of the centers from which arises all that is movement, to bring into being both the face and the preface, or the back or the reverse. In the experience, it carries with it what? That mind. For, remember, ever, the pattern is ever the same. Mind the builder. Conceived, then the first movement is along that center or gland which either fades or becomes a channel along which there may move the power and might to find expression through the very activities of the organs of the body itself. And those things as related to the conditions that are innate in the entity from experiences and that also builded. While those things that are of material or earthy are necessary to the well-being of the entity, there is not the wholehearted satisfaction as was felt that should come when there could be said, body, mind, take thine ease, for thine house is in order. And the entity has realized that there is but a shell for that house, and this does not satisfy that longing, or that ability that is magnified by that which is sincere or true love. As may be expressed in those of the relationships of individuals, for that other than that as may be given in exchange. For the entity has, does, and will more and more realize that as was given, that God so loved the world and those of the human forces, that there came that ability that would make for companionship that does not desire pay, do not desire that is a sham, nor that is duty. As moral, or as is socially understood by the world. But rather that of the nature that makes for, arises from, the elements of creative energy itself. That is not balanced either by passion of fury or of body, but the passion of that makes alive for those forces that bring into being that of the spiritual energies, in the nature and form, as to be inspiring to one to do their best in any and every direction. Born of creative forces alone. First we would give to this entity, and to all that may seek to read or have the interpretations of those experiences from the record of life of a solar entity. It is not that these may be so informative as for an individual to depend upon the laurels already made, but rather that these may become as living experiences. That there may be the application of the one thought, the one ideal that is the purpose for an entity's experience in the earth. For remember first, God so loved the world as to give his Son that we through him might know life. And in knowing it apply ourselves in such measures and manners as to become even as he, living examples, known of men. Not of self but the Father, through the Son, working in us day by day. As has been indicated then for the entity, this must and should grow more and more as a consciousness of the entity. The fact of the experiences of the mind and soul through those sojourns when there was caught the glimpse not only of God and love manifested in the earth, but the application of self and its relationships to the fellow man builded that experience into the soul, such that there are the greater longings that find expressions in the desire for creative influences and force. Whether these find manifestations in conveniences for individuals or the home, or whether they find expressions in the desire for writing. In analyzing or giving that which may be helpful for this group, many personalities are to be taken into consideration. This should be the ideal of each member of such a group. That the personality of the Christ consciousness may be the individuality of each group. Also each individual in the group. And as there is the analyzing of the Christ life, Christ consciousness, one realizes and finds that the Christ child was born into the earth as man. One born in due season, in due time, in man's spiritual evolution, that man might have a pattern of the personality and the individuality of God himself. Thus as the individuals in such a group read, analyze, study and apply those tenets, those truths that were presented by the Christ, they find that the Christ consciousness must become an individual and yet a living thing within their own individual consciousnesses. As with him, he found no fault in others. This should be the first premise, then, of each individual. Less and less condemning of others and more of self-manifesting that love shown by the Father through the Son in the material world. That man, through this pattern, through this picture of God, may become a living example, may walk closer in that way of less condemning. For as each individual realizes, as these tenets may be analyzed, if God had condemned, what opportunity would there be for man to find his way back to God? Thus each individual must do unto others as he would have his brother, the Christ, his God, the Father, do unto him. And indeed, then, apply first, last and always his forgive, O God, as I forgive others. Find fault in me, O God, as I find fault in my brother. Less and less then of self, more and more of perfect love, without dissimulations, keeping that faith. Know that as there is the activity of self, self can only sow the seed of truth. And it will be to each individual as was indicated to the children of Israel. They entered into the promised land not because of their righteousness, but because of the love of the Father for those who tried to live the righteousness. Thus each individual may have the try counted as righteousness. Not as an excuse, neither as justification. For ye have been justified once for all, through the Christ consciousness that ye seek. Then the life, the purpose of the individual, the members of such a life group, should be that they may walk closer to the Christ day by day in every way. For his promise has been and is ever to each soul, if ye will open thy mind, thy heart, I will enter, I will abide with thee. Not as a stranger, but as a brother, as a friend. Yes, we have the body, the inquiring mind, 275. This we have had before, and that which has been given the body respecting the seeking within self, and finding the expressions of those activities in the love for the awakening within self of the purposes, desires, aims, that would be in keeping with that he has given unto all, if ye love me, keep my commandments, that I may come and abide with thee. Hence, in the application of self, the judgments as to the activities in relations one with another are those things that are well-pleasing in his sight. For, as given, they that are of the light dwell in the light, and he abideth with them always. Let, then, the meditations of the heart, let the purposes, the desires of the mind, be one with those things thou knowest to do. For the Spirit quickeneth those that purpose in their hearts to serve the living God. For the day draweth nigh when they that have named the name of him in their lives, their purposes, their desires, will be in those positions where all will come and call on them. Is this then a prophecy? Even as I am studying in Paul to the Corinthians? Rather the understanding of those lessons as given by Paul, who is as the learned from the physical plane, yet even as is spoken of those teachings. Many rest with them to their own undoing. Meaning that it is not all to be learned in the material sense. Rather be in that manner as learned in the spiritual sense, with that understanding that to do good is to live good, and not to appear good. Be good. Not just appear good. To live love is to be love. To be one with the Father is to be equal with the Father, and as the understanding of the entity is gained in the application of truths gained, the consciousness of truth is apparent. For, as has been given, to love is to live love. Not the answer of desire or of amorous affection, but is all in one. For love is law, law is love. So attune thistles that ye may hearken, not as to an experience only, but rather live and be the experience in the hearts of those that are seeking to find their way. Whether in the troubles of the body, of the mind, or whether they are lost among those turmoils of the cry, this way, that way, here and there. Be the experience to someone to light their lives, their bodies, their minds to thy living Lord, thy brother, the Christ. For he has promised in his words in thine own heart, that keeps the hope, that keeps the fires of thine own heart aflame, ye finding me may know the joy of the Lord. As many of you served there, as many experienced those purifications for an active service among their fellow man in an individual experience, so may ye purify thy minds and thy bodies, or purify thy bodies that thy mind may put on Christ, the garments of a living Lord, that ye may be not as ones stumbling, as ones fearful of this or that, but sure and certain in the joys of a risen Lord. That indeed thy body in its expressions may be the temple beautiful for thy living Lord. He thy brother, thy Christ, hath given that God is God of the living way. He is life. He is love. He is beauty. He is harmony. He is music. He is the rhythm of the body and dance that is a service to thy God. Though others make slight of thy manner of speech, of thy body, of thy walks, of thy ways, hold fast to him. Grudging no one, loving all. For as given, in thy preparation, in the indication and the vindication in thine service there, self is lost in the love of thy fellow man, through the joy of the Lord in thee.